second-year breakout candidate, Seattle Seahawks defensive end edge rusher out of Auburn, Derick Hall. Didn't have a big season in 2023, but I'm looking for a bigger season in 2024. We're going to talk about this and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot for being out every day. As you know, I got to kick this intro to Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at TheTalentCode. Keith, talk to him, baby.
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man, and the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, where we're your number one source for NFL draft content. DP, today's show, we are talking about second-year breakouts, man, and then you teased it on yesterday's episode. You talked about a little trade scenario that I don't know what it is. So we're going to talk about this live on the podcast. We're going to get into this situation. And then we have a conversation for the Jets. Where are you guys playing Olu Fashanu? You addressed the offensive tackle position in free agency. Then you went and drafted another offensive tackle. We're going to figure this thing out. But DP, before we get this started, man, why don't you hit them with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Derick Hall, edge rusher for the Seattle Seahawks, 6'3", 255, a guy that we were both very high on coming into the 2023 NFL draft season. And Keith, he was a second-round pick, selected the 38th pick in that draft. He was a backup essentially for them for the Seattle Seahawks in 2023. I think he's poised for a breakout season because I think he's going to assume a starter role or be more involved. Remember, coming into the 2024 draft, most mock drafts, a lot of the big pundits and so-called insiders and everything, people are like, well, the Seahawks might go edge rusher. They might go Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, or Laitu Latu, and add somebody opposite of Boy Mafe. Right. Yeah. And I was like, after you just spent a second round pick on Derick Hall and you haven't really allowed him to kind of develop, and he only 308 total snaps throughout the whole season, 137 total pass rush snaps. Right. There's some games, especially after like week 8, he never saw 10 plus or double digit like snap share in terms of pass rush snaps. So for me, I look at Derick Hall, the strength, the speed, the power moves. And this is a guy who has that workman's mentality in terms of, we watched him at the Senior Bowl in 2023 last year, Keith, where it was him and our guy, Byron Young. And it was crazy because they were two very similar guys. They were working along with each other, talking through pass rush counters and hand usage and different things like that. I just think that he's poised for a breakout because we saw what Boy Mafe did last year. He was a baller for them last year. I know they have Chenna Nwosu, who they got from the Chargers, who they picked up, I think through free agency from the Chargers. But he's not enough to keep Derick Hall off the field.
Yeah, and when you spend that type of draft capital on a guy, right, especially with the upside, DP, you remember them working out at the practice. I remember when this guy showed up to the Senior Bowl, right? I think he had the big white pickup truck, and we were like, who is that, right? Like, because it was a big old boy. You're talking about every bit of 6'4", 6'5", 260, low body fat percentage, right? Looks like a dude at the end of the day. And I thought the film showed well, right? When you talk about watching his film at Auburn. So I think it's just a matter of him getting the reps. Now, he could be one of those players, DP, and this is a scouting tidbit, right? And I don't know how many people listening have heard this, but to truly judge whether a draft pick was successful or not, I know in the NFL and leagues and things like that, they always talk about it's not the first year, you judge it based off of their second year, how they look about halfway through their second year, because that first year is such a whirlwind, man. You spend your entire offseason doing draft process stuff, right? Stuff that doesn't directly correlate and you getting better, right? Talking about the L drill, the 5-10-5 shuttle, all of those different things have nothing to do with being a pass rusher, right? So you finally get an off season. He can spend his entire off season. I'm more than sure he's going to go with some trainer, right, and work on his craft and become more detailed in what he's doing. And then also you hope that he's more comfortable. I can't remember if Seattle has a new defensive coordinator also. I know they have a new offensive coordinator. Can't remember
They
they
have Mike McDonald, the defense coordinator from the Ravens. He's their new head coach. Yeah.
Okay. So, but I do honestly, I almost like that situation better for him, right? Just because of what the Ravens do. And especially with those edge rushers, right? And how historically, the Ravens have prioritized the edge rusher position. So I think that's a really good situation, for our guy Derick Hall, just to kind of come up and to ball out this year and take that next step. I do have another edge rusher, DP, and we kind of talked about it, but we never talked about it here. That is the back end of the first round. That is Mr. Myles Murphy himself. I am looking for a prime breakout. I think I had this guy as edge rusher 2, I believe, in last year's draft class.
2 or 3. It was somewhere in there.
Yeah, it was 2 or 3, but couldn't understand why he would fall, right? And obviously liked him over guys like Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, who went to the Jets, Will McDonald, right? Like all of these guys went ahead of him, and I liked him exponentially more, to be honest with you. And so I'm looking at him in that situation with the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Bengals are one of your teams, right? You can explain the depth and roster more, but the talent level, you're talking about being a 5-star kid when he came out of high school, being 6'5", 270, fluid. It's just a matter of reps for him, and I'm gonna let you kind of hit on that point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you have Trey Hendrickson, who's all pro level type of player, Pro Bowl level type of player, I think 20 sacks in 2023, right? But there's so many good edge rushers, you can't get some of the nods with TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, and they're playing the same exact division as you. You know what I mean? It's easy. It's easy to be overshadowed with.
That's crazy. You might be
the
third best edge rusher, but you're the third best edge rusher in your own division too.
In your own division, which is nuts, right? Like, so it's easy to get overshadowed. But they got Sam Hubbard on the other side, who's a solid, just a guy who plays well against the run, knows how to set the edge, and a guy that also, to me, can slide down and rush ahead of guards and stuff. The pass rush upside has never really been there for him. He's just always been going to be a solid starter for you. Yep. When I look at Myles Murphy, the speed, the athleticism, the speed, the power, the arm length, the way that he was able to win when he was at Clemson, right? Especially under Brent Venables. Now, when they made the switch and Brent Venables went to OU, like everybody in their defense didn't look the same.
Doing different stuff,
like they weren't utilized right. Like, and I'll be honest with you, like even with Wesley, I think is Coach Goodwin. Even last year, a lot of the guys that some guys took step forward, some guys you're like, man, like if Brent Venables was still here, this dude would be having an outstanding season, So I look at Myles Murphy, I said, man, this is the year you go ahead and you put him in that starting lineup, opposite of Trey Hendrickson, because what you want to do is you want to keep Lamar in the pocket. You want to get to Deshaun Watson, right? You want to, if it's Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, or a combination of both, you want to close the pocket from each side. And you know that teams are going to try and slide protection to Hendrickson because he's that good. So I'd rather have that high upside, toolsy guy that I know the more reps, the better development, right? And allow him to just take that step. I'm not, and like I said, no disrespect to Sam Hubbard, I wouldn't start him. I'm starting Myles Murphy from the get-go, in my opinion, because I need to see what we have in him going into this next class of 2025. Spoiler alert, guys. I think I said it last week, but we shifted some things. Next week, we start summer scouting, so be prepared for that because we're going to talk about the 2025 class this summer, but we already know that class is loaded from a defensive standpoint, so you need to know what you have in Myles Murphy right now.
Yeah, and I simply think that, and I'm sure you agree with this statement, that Myles Murphy has more upside too, right? I think Sam Hubbard, you know exactly what you're getting. It's not a knock on him, right? Good, solid, like football player, right? Like you can win games with him being your starting defensive end. It's just that Myles Murphy provides that potential for consistent double-digit sacks, right, year in and year out as a football player. So we'll see how that thing goes. But man, we talk about second-year breakouts. We both went edge rushers. It could be an interesting situation. But coming up next, this secret trade scenario that I'm trying to figure out. DP doesn't want to tell me, so we're going to talk about it coming up in the next segment. What is this trade scenario that DP is going to propose coming up next?
NBA Finals are almost set with the Boston Celtics waiting for their opponent between the Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. Guys, I can tell you right now, I would love the opportunity to be able to hit up and go to an NBA Finals game. It will be one of the best and coolest experiences. But you can go. You can too. Game Time makes getting NBA tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. So whether it is your favorite team and it's the Boston Celtics or the Minnesota Timberwolves or the Dallas Mavericks, it does not matter. Game Time is the place that you want to shop with. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Keith, I teased it at the end of yesterday's show. I said, I'm not going to tell you until we get on the show today. My trade scenario is this. I look at the Dallas Cowboys, and we talked about the rumors about them trading for Najee Harris, right? Mm-hmm. And while that would be a really good trade, you know what would be a better trade? You call up a team that I just talked about in the first segment, the Seattle Seahawks, and you call them up, and you ask for Kenneth Walker III. And the reason why, after Kenneth Walker had a good rookie season, they said, you know what we should do? Second round of 2023, we should go get another running back. Then they say, you know what we should do again in the 7th round is get another running back. So they doubled down in the same draft and added 2 more running backs, right? Getting Zach Charbonnet in round 2, getting our guy, Kenny McIntosh, in the 7th round. For me, if I'm Dallas, you went into the 2024 draft, and the only running back you were linked to was a guy in your backyard at Texas, and that was Jonathan Brooks. You got sniped. It happens, right? Like the Carolina Panthers jumped in front of you and took him. There were still other viable options for you, and you said, nah, we're good. And then you brought back Zeke, and you got Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn. You got a room of guys. But when I look at Kenneth Walker, if you go and make that pick, and to me, it makes more sense to get a Kenneth Walker than a Najee Harris, because Najee Harris you would have to pay because the Steelers didn't pick up his 5th-year option. Right. Kenneth Walker has 2 years left because he's going into his 3rd season. He's explosive. He's dynamic. Great vision. He's scheme versatile. He can run gap. He can run zone. But also he catches the ball out of the backfield, and then he's a big playmaker. And even if you still want to make Zeke a fixture in this offense, you can still do that. But looking at the situation in Seattle, I would call them and say, hey, you run Charbonnet and McIntosh. Here's a 3rd, 4th round pick for Kenneth Walker. I got 2 years plus, I think 2 years plus a potential franchise tag situation.
Or
you know what I'm saying?
He's not going to have a 5th-year option. I'm tripping because he went in the second round.
He was second round. So like you got, years 3 and 4 this year and next year. And you can franchise tag him if you want. You can give him an extension if he goes up there and busts 1,300 yards rushing for you. But I think this is this would be a big moment, a big move for the Dallas Cowboys to get some real talent, young talent, explosive talent in that backfield for Dak Prescott. And dear God, if you're not going to pay Dak, you got to pay somebody. So Keith, you tell me, would you say yes or no to this trade scenario?
If I'm the Dallas Cowboys, without a doubt, I make this trade. You're able to right your wrongs, right? Potentially a couple years later. Now, the question is this. If I'm the Seattle Seahawks, there's 2 more elements to this. If I'm the Seattle Seahawks, would I make this trade? And then secondly, what is the compensation I'm giving up to get Kenneth Walker? So let's walk through the first one. If you're the Seattle Seahawks, DP, because the Dallas Cowboys, without a doubt, you should make this trade, right? Like you should get it done. But if you're the Seattle Seahawks, do you make this trade? And I get it that you drafted other backs, but do you believe, DP, Now I'm gonna flip this on you and ask you this question: that
Mhm.
those backs are the same caliber, right? After we scouted these guys, because they haven't played a whole lot in the NFL, right? So we still, the draft podcast, we have to go off of what we've seen through the draft process. Do you believe that those guys are still of the same caliber of Kenneth Walker that you're willing to let go of Kenneth Walker?
I think together you can find solace solace in it, excuse me, in terms of Zach Charbonnet is going to be that physical downhill runner for you. He was pretty decent last year in the touches of 108 attempts, 462 yards rushing, 4.3 yards per carry with
Solid.
one
Yep.
touchdown. He was solid. You know what I mean? What you're not going to get is the missed tackles forced as much because Kenneth Walker is more of the twitchy, elusive jump cut. He's going to be able to create more. Not saying that Zach Charbonnet for a big back can create a little bit for himself, but that's when Kenny McIntosh comes in. Go back to his time at Georgia. He played everywhere. There's moments he's lined up in the slot. I remember studying him and I'm watching the offense. I thought Kenny McIntosh was a receiver. And I was like, oh no, that's actually the running back, right? Like, and he's running routes. So like he can give you can have that best of both worlds situation where you have that early first and second down runner and then a high quality third down talent and use those two pieces if you're Seattle because those are two cost efficient guys, right? You don't have to worry about you be further down the line paying them than paying Kenneth Walker, and the draft or trade compensation would have to be, like I said, late day 2 pick, like a third round pick. If Dallas has a third round pick in 2025, I want that pick if I'm Seattle, right? Maybe I take a fourth, with a combination of something else. You know what I mean? But I think that's where I would be in that situation. You have to give me a day 2 pick, like a third round pick if I'm Seattle. And if I'm Dallas, I don't mind sending that. I don't mind sending that at all because you're willing to spend a second round pick on Jonathan Brooks coming off of ACL. If you're willing to use that high of a pick on the guy coming off of a big time injury like that, I think you can get this third. Take it. I don't care. I got 2 years of a cost efficient running back who has proven to me in his career that he is darn good. You know what I mean? Like even when I brought in competition, he was still my starter as a rookie. 243 attempts, 1,113 yards rushing, 4.6 yards per carry, and 10 touchdowns. In 2024, when he's splitting carries, 219 attempts, 900 yards, a little over 4 yards per carry, and still 8 touchdowns. And again, he also catches the ball in the backfield. So this is a guy that I think for Dallas, with this offensive line that they have built this offseason, oh yeah, man, I want to get somebody explosive back there, Keith. If I'm Dallas, I take this third. Take it, Seattle. I don't care. Take this third and let me go ahead and get this young running back off your hands. And y'all go ahead and roll with the 2 guys that you drafted last year.
Yeah, I think that, and we have to look at it, go back to that draft, right? Kenneth Walker was probably an underrated prospect in a sense. I
He
think
was like the second runner. He was right behind Brees because everybody had Brees as RB1. Remember, like everybody's like, oh, it's clear that Brees is the RB1. And I was always the guy like against that. I was like, nah, man, like for me, I like a guy that's scheme versatile as a runner. I like a guy that can create for himself.
Yeah, and it was just a question of his 40 time, but I think he came in a high 4.3, low 4.4,
yeah.
right? And then kind of, done away with those conversations. But I think he has an opportunity to be a real complete back in this, in the NFL. And you look at styles and body types, and the name that just popped up in my mind is Josh Jacobs, right? And we know what Josh Jacobs was able to do in his heyday. Talking about the thick lower frame, explosive, can seek contact, can run through you, lateral cuts, all of those type of, I think they compare very favorably to each other. And it's just a matter of getting him the touches. Like you said, he's yet to carry the ball for 250 times in a season, right? So they're still splitting carries. So I think it'd be an interesting situation, DP. If I'm the Dallas Cowboys, it's exactly the joke that you need in this running back room, because at the end of the day, you need a complete back, right? Like, and I don't know what the Dallas Cowboys plan on selling to the fan base, but you can't tell me one year that Ezekiel Elliott is not good enough. Let him walk. You know what I'm saying? Like the front office, right? You can't tell me that he's not good enough. Let him walk. Go to New England. Who cares? And then bring him back the very next year, and then tell me he's the back we needed, right? It doesn't make any sense at all.
All in, Keith.
It doesn't make any sense. It's very hard to sell somebody on that situation when you the one that told them the initial situation, right? So it's a wild thing. But I'm definitely making that trade. Seattle, am I making that trade? I think I may I may be convinced, right? If you give me a solid third round pick, maybe, but I potentially DP, and maybe this is how aggressive I am on Kenneth Walker. I think he has the potential to be a top 10 back in the NFL.
Easy. Yeah.
And so that's why I'm still kind of hesitant to give
Yeah.
him up if I'm Seattle at the end of the day. But DP, I like that trade scenario, man. We need to do that more often. We definitely need to bring in some more trade scenarios through this process. But listen, coming up next, man, we're going to talk about the Jets, man. They drafted Olu Fashanu with the number 10 overall pick, but in free agency, right? They also signed a couple guys. They have Morgan Moses. They have Tyron Smith. They snatched him up from where? The Dallas Cowboys, right? And so now we have to figure out, where is Olu Fashanu going to play in 2024? We're going to have that conversation coming up next.
Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Olu Fashanu, offensive tackle out of Penn State, but he went to a team, as you said, Keith, that brought in 2 veteran tackles. Matter of fact, they brought in 3 veteran offensive linemen, because they brought in Tyron Smith. They brought in Morgan Moses at the tackle spot, and then they went and got John Simpson from the Baltimore Ravens to play left guard. And Keith, that's the spot. I'm like, okay, if the two veteran tackles are going to stay healthy, they are quote good starters, like bar none, right? You good at left and right tackle, so you don't think Olu can take their spots. But if you draft him in 11th, you know what I mean, the 11th overall pick, you want him on the field. Keith, I think you keep him on the left side and you play him at left guard. I watch. Again, you talked about me having the Cincinnati Bengals, over at the Draft Network. I also have the Baltimore Ravens in my NFL scouting region. John Simpson was just okay to me. He wasn't a needle mover. He was solid. I absolutely think Olu could step in and play. And the main thing for me is, like, as we talked about, right, when we had Crafton Lyman on, right, talk about flipping from left to right and going from right-handed to left-handed and all that. That's why I would leave him at left guard, because if I leave him at left guard, his sets, in a sense, is still predominantly open in that left hip. It's still the same muscle memory for him. Instead of flipping them to the right side in any capacity, now he's kind of learning and trying to develop that muscle memory of opening that right hip more and moving more to the right when he starts, different things like that, where I leave him at the left to when Tyron Smith does walk away, he's no longer on this roster, I could just one spot over, baby. Let's move you one spot back over to your natural position. But I think that, especially with his run blocking, right? I think that was one of his biggest strengths coming into this season, coming into the draft, was his run blocking. I think for Breece Hall and the fact that Robert Solomon want to run that football, I think he would be a better fit to inject that left guard, because we know that he's a really good run blocker, and that way you're going to get him into a rhythm, get him going earlier, get him moving forward. I remember talking to a couple of offensive linemen that went, from college to leaders, and man, the run game truly allows you to really get your juices flowing. You get settled a lot easier because you're getting to be the aggressor and not you're not defensive. You literally get to be offensive. So I think left guard should be the spot. If they're going to play him in 2024, which I think would make sense since you drafted them top 12, I think left guard should be the spot. And if something happens to Tyron, if he does get hurt, you slide Olu over, you throw John Simpson in.
Yeah, okay. I agree with that. And then I think some people are gonna be like, okay, well, what are you gonna do with John Simpson then? Right? Is he just a quality depth guy at this point?
Yes.
I don't. And what I'm saying is that I get. Because you have to put Olu on the field, right? That's kind of the issue a little bit, that you sign 2 offensive tackles and then you bring in Olu, which I think Olu is extremely talented, right? And if you like, you know what, we're just going best player available and we'll figure it out, I guess that part is fine at the end of the day, right? Like, because I agree with some of the thought process of not reaching for team needs and going with best player available. I just thought that this was such an interesting dynamic because you knew that you could get one of these offensive tackles, meaning that there were so many offensive tackles that can start right away that you doubted that you wouldn't have an opportunity to get one. So in the offseason, when you sign 2 offensive tackles, to me, that was a clear sign that we're not drafting an offensive tackle. You get what I'm saying? Because think about it, DP. Yeah. Even if Olu went at pick 9, right? And the Jets sitting at pick 10, you still had a chance at Talise Fuaga, right? Like you still had a chance at other offensive tackle. Kingsley Sumatia, who we really like, didn't go to later. Jordan Morgan went the back end of the first round, right? So there was still like you were going to have a shot at drafting an offensive tackle. So I just thought that it was an interesting spot. I agree with you if you're talking about pointing out a weak, I don't hate to say it like that, but a potential weak link. Because you even look at the right side, Elijah Vera Tucker is at right guard. So you look at their draft, they drafted Olu Fashanu. You have to get him on the field. You first round, you have to know what you have. And just the fact that in the past, right, it's been very weird, with the Mekhi Becton situation.
Yeah.
You go offensive tackle again, you want to get this thing right. So I would be interested to see him at guard. I think if you're talking about a move, right, putting him at guard and then sliding him back out at tackle, I think can be something that can be very beneficial. Olu is 6'6", right? Every bit of 6'6". So you're talking about a pretty big left side of your offensive line. And like we said, the truth of the matter is, especially thinking about the scheme, it's still that zone scheme, right? And he's first of all athletic enough. And then when we watched him, when you evaluated him as a draft prospect, he has want to in the run game, right? Like he's not just a stalemate guy or just seal you off. Like he's a guy that's going to try to climb to the second level. He's a guy that's going to try to put you in the ground. So just asking him to play the guard position, I think is not bad at all. And I agree with you also is that you let him battle it out with John Simpson at the left guard. I think that's a much better solution than I had some fans, telling us like, hey, well, Tyron Smith, like Tyron Smith is going to get hurt anyway. And I'm like, well, you don't sign
How are we predicted injuries?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Like stop doing that, okay? Because y'all was negative about Aaron Rodgers, and look how that happened, right? You don't predict, like you don't sign a guy and feel good about an offseason signing and then predict that he's going to get injured. Like that's not the proper way to go about this. If you're trying to get your team to win some games, man. So
Keith, not to cut you off, but it reminds me of some last year with the Steelers, right? When you had Broderick Jones, you believed in Dan Moore. That did not work out for you as so well, but you put Broderick Jones at right tackle and you got him the experience he needed, right? And now they drafted Troy Fautanu. Now you could either, if you want to leave Broderick at right, cool, you can play Troy at left, or you can flip them. They're both athletic enough to do either or, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's how I look at this situation. It's like, listen, man, we drafted you pretty early in the first round, top 20. We got to get you on the field. And if you're one of our 5 best offensive linemen, we're going to do it. And listening to Olu at the combine, the intelligence level is through the roof. So well spoken, like he's battle tested from dealing with Chop, Adiz Isaac. You know what I mean? All the different pass rushes they have.
He's playing in the Big Ten, Michigan, Ohio State. So you've seen all those guys.
Jesus, like all the gauntlet of edge rushers that's in that conference alone. Like he knows what it takes to get it done on the outside, and then just allow him to learn from the learning tree that is Tyron Smith, right? So he could be literally playing alongside him at left guard, but also picking up cues and nuggets of technique and different things that play in tackle. So when that moment comes, you're prepared for it.
Yeah, I agree. And DP, listen, that may be the solution because that was a head scratcher for me. You know it was, right? Because we were together watching it live. And I'm like, where are they going to play Olu Fashanu? I really like Olu Fashanu, but where are they going to put this guy? And what is the solution? So we'll figure this thing out and see how it goes. But DP, one thing we do know, man, but this is the best NFL draft content out there on YouTube. Thank you. I want to say the best NFL draft podcast out there. I want to say shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Listen, man, I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my co-host, my guy, Mr. Damian Paulson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we always like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or if you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot for being our everydayers. And guys, on tomorrow's show, we're getting into rookies under the most pressure, and I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to Sin City with Brock Bowers. We're going to talk about that and more on tomorrow's show. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.